And that's not even one.
Did you go to the, oh, if it's Shema, it's yeah.
Hi, how are you? Pretty good.
Oh, then it was Schoenberg, and Bruckner.
It could be challenging.
I never won.
Okay.
It does.
Have you been to the Washington post office? Don't use it. People keep on getting checks stolen from, there's been a number of cases. People fail, hide their checks at the post office. And the checks stolen and the amounts changed. Yeah, so I've been using Lineage.
We haven't been.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, to the second seat. And we get back.
I mean, they're really miserable.
I find Lineage is a convenient post office to go to. There's no rural kind of thing.
Yeah, but sometimes, you know, you get older. You gotta look it up. All these employees,
So how sense that you have
Well, yes, I'm terrible.
good.
Yes,
So
I
you
know.
are
Better. I am
Just to get demonstrated.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning, hi, good morning. Hi again, guys. I'm cooking the bagels.
No, we were talking about Engaged Mills, there's a little library. Engaged Mills, there's a little public library.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
You're out of date now, it's about Yugoslavians.
Oh, what's it?
Right.
Hi, welcome back. How are you?
I think somebody here named Jackie, and I can't.
Oh, yeah, but you know my friend
But it's not Jackie. No. I keep thinking, well, maybe it's Jackie.
Oh,
Tell her,
I'm so glad you're here.
tell her I really think about her.
Well,
Way down on my list.
you know, she's now working Saturdays, so she watches from work to the she can, but she doesn't come anymore.
Marvin Cow.
I'm terrible. I can't do any tricks. Take a dog and I have to get something at home. Did they break the windows?
She doesn't worry about windows, she's worried about
Which is
Good.
each other.
doing each other. Oh, well.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Looks like our numbers are growing a little bit here. And welcome to those who are live streaming. So glad to see you guys too. Okay. So, here we are. Okay, very good. So why don't we continue with our blessing for the study of Torah? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through his commandments, enjoining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay, so we're in the Kantian topic of what ought I to do, and we've looked carefully at a variety of passages and ways in which the Torah tries to deliver imperatives to us. When we get to the end, which is looming on this topic, I'm going to try to summarize it a bit and just bring it together. As I've said on several occasions, it's hard to put together the ethics of the Tanakh in any clear, systematic way, because one reason I think is that the Bible is not a philosophical book. It's not trying to organize its things in some linear, logical fashion, laying down premises and then showing what those premises yield. It's much more, I might call it an occasional book. By that I mean it deals with occasions and not so much logical unfolding. But I do think we can try to abstract some general approaches and principles. And so once we get to the end, I'm going to try to do that with some trepidation, because I'm just not sure how plausible it is to do it. I always remember the phrase or the statement by the poet William Wordsworth that we murder to dissect. If we try to take an issue apart and look at it piece by piece, dissecting it into its component parts, we take the life out of it. You know what I'm saying? One of my favorite examples out of my own life is that when I was a kid, I got interested in classical music and asked my father to bring home some pocket scores. Not the big things that conductors have, but little things this size. And I remember looking at the first movement of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, which is one of the astonishing pieces in the history of music, and looking at some secondary sources and trying to understand what's going on. And for a long time, that analysis ruined it for me. Because I had taken it apart logically and looked at components, and the flow of the whole of it was lost on me for a while. So I'm going to try to do this with our biblical text in terms of the various ethical components, but there's a risk in it, but I think it's one worth taking. So today I want to look at the question, who teaches? In other words, we've been looking at the content of ethics in the Bible, but there is the question of who teaches it and what are the pedagogical devices that teachers have, whoever they are. So we're gonna put aside as our primary focus aspects of ethics and look at who teaches ethics and what is it that they teach. So let's first look at Genesis 18. Genesis 18 is one of the important chapters in the Bible. I know I say that very often. Whenever I teach, and I have over the years, the 6 basic chapters in the Bible, I mean, that's a silly thing to do, but it's still fun to do. Genesis 18 is always one of them. It has the hospitality episode, and then God calls Abraham and tells Abraham what he's going to think about doing with Sodom and Gomorrah. And there Abraham challenges God. So that the chapter is packed. In between, those 3 visitors who come to Abraham mysteriously, but evidently are emissaries of God, announce that Sarah's going to have a child in another year. And you remember she laughs at this. But let's not forget that the chapter before, Genesis 17, Abraham has laughed as well at the very same prediction. So that both mother and father-to-be are scoffing at this idea that Sarah at 90 and Abraham at 100 can have a child. So that's also in chapter 18. So let's look at chapter 18, verse 16 in Genesis. The men set out from there, that is from the first half of the chapter, from visiting Abraham, and looked down towards Sodom, Abraham walking with them to see them off. Now the Lord had said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do?" Why not? Why shouldn't I hide from Abraham? Verse 18. Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him. Okay, so Abraham and his seed is to become a great nation. And on top of that, they are to be the vehicle, Abraham's people, for blessing, the blessing of other nations. For, verse 19, I have singled him out that he may instruct his children and his posterity. Let's see what the Hebrew is there. For I have literally known him, Yadativ, in order that he command Banav, his sons, the Et Beito, and his house after him, so that he may instruct the first generation and the subsequent generations to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is just and right, in order that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Okay? So Abraham, as an individual and as the progenitor of a nation, in other words, Abraham is both an individual and a kind of symbol. It's not quite the way of saying it. Abraham is to be a teacher of his children, as all descendants of Abraham are to be too. Okay? So parents, right here, have the obligation to teach their children. But not only to teach their children, but to try to allow that teaching to continue on down through the generations. That's how I understand Beito, his house or his household. And what are they to teach? The justice and righteousness. What is justice and righteousness? The way of the Lord. So that this introduces, and we've seen it before, the notion of imitatio Dei, the imitation of God. God is represented here as doing what is just and right. That's exactly why Abraham challenges him, because it doesn't seem that destroying the Sodomites is just and right. And Abraham can call God to account because the ethical claim here is to follow the ways of the Lord by doing what is just and right. Also notice to keep the way of the Lord, not just to entertain ideas, but to engage in activity. The way of the Lord by doing. This is doing and not just thinking. So that this couple of verses are packed already at the very beginning of the adventure of Abraham and his descendants, the centrality of teaching, of instructing. And the content of the instruction is not stories, it's not rituals, it's not fables, it's ethics. You're to teach your children how to do acts of justice and righteousness following the way of the Lord. Okay? So, right at the beginning, this becomes central. I want to now turn us to Deuteronomy chapter 6. When somebody gets the page, I know we have different Bibles.
389.
I'm sorry?
389.
389 in the Jewish Publication Society. What do you have there, Charlotte? No, you have the same one that I have, which is the Hebrew English. Some of you have the Jewish Publication Society English only.
284.
284? Okay. Now I'm going to read chapter 6, verses 1 through 10, maybe a little further. And after I've read it, I want to ask you to answer the following question. What is this?
What is what?
Okay, what is this? Okay, so let's think about it while I'm reading it. And this is the instruction, the laws and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere the Lord your God and follow as long as you live all his laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you, to the end that you may long endure. Obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, spoke to you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to assign to you, great and flourishing cities that you didn't build, houses full of all good things that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant, and you eat your fill, take heed that you do not forget the Lord who freed you from the land of Egypt and the house of bondage. Revere only the Lord your God and worship him alone, and swear only by his name. Do not follow other gods, any gods of the peoples about you, for the Lord your God in your midst is an impassioned God, lest the anger of the Lord your God blaze forth against you, and he wipe you off the face of the earth. Now, don't anybody say anything out loud. Get the answer in your mind to the question, what is this? Okay? Or what is a part of it? Everybody have an answer? Okay, I have an answer too. Okay? What is this?
It's the essence of Judaism.
Okay, it's the essence of Judaism. Good answer. What else? What other answer? What else? Jim?
It's a call for loyalty and an expression of extreme authority.
Okay. Okay, very good. Extreme authority. Let me read a part of this and ask you what it is. I'll just start it. Verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. What is that? It's the Shema and the V'ahavta. Here's my answer. That's wrong. It's not the Shema and the V'ahavta. What is it? It's Deuteronomy Chapter 6, verse 1 through 15. It's not the V'ahavta. It's Bible. What did it take for it to become the V'ahavta? A decision that this, now we're back to your original answers, that this is the sum and substance, this is the essence. But it's not the V'ahavta until somebody decided to lift it from the Bible and to put it into another book, the prayer book. Okay? So far, this is only chapter 6. So let's go back and divide chapter 6 into 3 sections. 1 through 3, verses 1 through 3. Verses 4 through 9, and verses 10 through 15. That's what I read, right? 3 sections. If we want to ask what was lifted out and put into the prayer book, the answer is verses 4 through 9, right? And to repeat myself, that was a decision to take a unified piece and to lift an excerpt out and to call it the essence. We can really understand it as the essence if we look at the structure of the prayer book. Let me say something about this quickly. There are several sections of the prayer book. The prayer book is a kind of narrative in prayers. There are preliminaries. Then there's the Shema and its blessings. That's a unit that begins with the Baruch Hu. The Baruch Hu is a call to worship. Praise God. It's an imperative, Baruch Hu, from bracha. Praise or bless, really praise, but sometimes translated bless, to whom all praise is due. We don't say that the first thing we do in the service. We do a bunch of things first. And then 10 minutes later, we get to the Baruch Hu. The Baruch Hu is a call to worship per se. What's earlier are preliminaries. I don't mean to demean them, but they're not the basic structure of the service. Starting with the Baruch Hu, after that we have 2 blessings. We praise God for nature. We praise God for Torah. Then we do the Shema and the V'ahavta. Then we do the prayer for liberation, that God, Michamocha, saved us from Egypt. Then we get to the next section, which is the Tefillah. Please rise, as I say, I'm not asking you to do this now, for the Amidah. That's the next section. Starting with the Avot, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei, and so on. That's the next section. Notice the Shema and its blessings, just by its very name, suggests that what's central is the Shema, which is not just the chapter 6, verse 4, but 6:4 through 9, followed by the V'ahavta, surrounded by blessings, before and after. The blessing right up against the Shema is a thanks to God for expressing his love for us by giving us Torah. Then we say, you shall love the Lord your God. In other words, it's the form of a covenant. God has given us a world and has given us Torah in love. As a response, we promise to love God back. Okay? So the relationship here in the prayer book is based on a covenant grounded in love. God for us, we for God. Okay, so that's an illustration of the centrality of chapter 6, verse 4 through 9. Okay? It's one of the pivot points of the entire service. So here's the question. I've divided now chapter 6, 1 through 15 into three parts. Verses 1 through 3, verses 4 through 9, verses 10 through 15. I want to read again 4 through 9, and then I want to ask the following question. So I've divided chapter 6 into three parts. 4 through 9 is the middle part. So I want to read the middle part, and then I want to go back to part 1 and part 2, the two parts that surround the middle part, and ask what elements in 1 and 3 are not in 2. If we can understand that, we can understand the logic of separating verses 4 through 9 out and calling it one of the central components of Judaism. If section 1 and 3, if section 2 only repeated all that's in 1 and 3, those who selected this for the prayer book might have selected the whole thing. In other words, out of a natural flow of verses 1 through 15, they selected only verses 4 through 9. And the question is, why? I don't know the answer to that. But we can guess at an answer by seeing what elements in section 1 and section 3 are not in section 2. You see the question? Okay, so let me read 4 through 9 again. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone, or the Lord is one. The issue of echad can give different answers. God is one, God alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Okay, that's why we're reading this here, is we're interested in the question, who teaches? Who teaches the values of Judaism and so on? Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. That's section 2. Now I'm going to go back to section 1. And let's ask ourselves, what is it in section 1 that's not in section 2? And this is the instruction, the laws, the rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere the Lord your God, and follow as long as you live all his laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you, to the end that you may long endure. Obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in the land, a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, spoke to you. What's in section 1 that's not in section 2? I'm sorry?
Love. What's in section 1? Oh, that's not in 2.
That's
Obey.
that's not in 2. You're right about section 2 that's not in 1.
Right.
Yeah. So love is central to section 2. And we might want to ask ourselves, what does that mean? I think that this section 2 tells us to some degree. Okay? Bennett?
Well, it tells you what you will receive if you follow what the instructions that are to follow.
Very good. Let's call it reward and punishment. If you follow these things, you will get a reward. Verse 2, that you and your children may revere the Lord your God as long as you live, all as long as to the end, that you may long endure. Obey, O Israel, and go well with you, and that you may increase greatly. Reward and punishment are not in section 2. What else is in section 1 that's not in section 2? I'm sorry?
Where's the punishment? I don't see
Where's the
I see
punishment?
reward.
Well, it's implied, isn't it? That it may go well with you. The implication being, and if you don't obey these instructions, you won't get, or you may be.
Okay, but it's an iffy thing if you don't.
Okay, that's a good point. It's not explicit, but I would say I have very little need to say this, but I'm going to say it. In other words, I think you've got a good point here. But I want to also say that the converse seems implied. If you follow this instruction, it'll go well with you. Well, maybe I won't. What if I don't? That I think is implied, but I wouldn't argue strongly for that point.
More of a threat then.
Yeah, then it would be more of a threat. Okay, but the notion of a consequence for your action is introduced. What else? Jackie?
It's a lot, it seems to be the summary of all the laws and instructions that was previously given. You know, if you go back, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery. So it's basically saying you have to follow all the laws that have previously been stated.
Good.
But this is just a condensation of, it's a summary.
What is a summary?
Section 1.
Section 1, you shall do this.
This is what, yeah, follow
Okay.
the laws.
Very good,
But it
okay.
doesn't state what the laws are.
So it's a kind of summary of what has come before. The other element is land. To be observed, verse 1 in the middle, in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, and so on. That you may, the end you may long endure, that you increase greatly. Now I'm in the middle of verse 3. In a land flowing with milk and honey. Let's look at section 3, starting in verse 10. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Bill, and so on and so on. Verse 12, take heed you do not forget the Lord who freed you, and so on. Revere only the Lord your God. This introduces another element, verse 13. Et Adonai Elohecha tira. Tira can be translated revere or fear. Okay? That is not in section 2. There's only love, there's not fear. Verse 14. Don't follow any gods of the peoples, for the Lord your God is an impassioned God, lest the anger of the Lord blaze against you and he wipe you off the face of the earth. That's what Bennett did not find in section 1, it's in section 3.
Section 1 also says, you will follow these willingly, if you do it willingly.
Okay, very good. Where do you see that, by the way?
It's line,
Verse 3. Verse 3.
Obey, O Israel, willingly.
Yes. Interesting. Because those words are not explicitly in the Hebrew. V'shamata, Shema. Shema means hear, but it also means heed. Not just hear, but follow. From which I think the translator says, hear faithfully. V'shamata Yisrael, v'shamarta, and keep. So the translator has taken these two words in their more intensive form, but the adverbs willingly and faithfully are not there. Once again, there's nothing at stake for me in the point that I just made. It very well might be, okay, but it's not explicit. Bennett?
Yeah, wouldn't it be, when we receive the Ten Commandments, and we say we will follow them, and we will then hear them.
Yes.
In other words, we're going to accept them no matter what you tell us. We're accepting them ahead of time.
Okay, very good. Yeah, right. Yeah. We will do and we will understand. Yeah. Okay, good. So, sections 1 and sections 3, I just want to focus on 2 of the components that we have isolated here, have land and have reward and punishment. Or at least reward, consequences. Now let's look at 4 to 9 and notice this. and draw the implications. Hear, O Israel, Lord our God, Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home, when you are away, when you lie down, and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Okay, so let's imagine now that we are all ancient rabbis, and we're looking for some part of Torah to be emblematic of the essence of Judaism. And our assignment last night was read the Bible again and find a candidate for that position. And we come in the next day, and here we are. And go with me on this. We all agree that this is the passage. That 6, 4 through 9 is the passage we need. What is our reasoning? Why do we, you go with me on this. We all agree this is the passage. Let's assume that. We don't have to assume it, but let's assume it. If we do, why did we pick this passage? In other words, let's try to get into the heads of the rabbis who decided this. Because once again, this was a decision. It's not written in the margins here of the ancient Torah. This is it, guys. Somebody had to say, what's our reasoning? Malcolm?
Going back to where you started, this would seem to be in some ways a bookend to Genesis 6.
To what?
Genesis 6, which you pointed us to, where Abraham was instructed around justice and righteousness.
Good. Genesis 18.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
And following the ways of the Lord.
Okay.
So that was an instruction to the progenitor. This is a more vivid or richer instruction to now the people of Israel.
Okay. So this is an intensification, you didn't use that word, but you might, of what's contained in that first sentence to Abraham in Genesis 18, now not just for Abraham, but for everybody. Okay? So the presupposition of what you've said is, what God said to Abraham in Genesis 18 is absolutely fundamental. And here we're just expanding it a bit.
I would expand on that by saying this passage drives it home to the present day, to everyday life,
Okay.
to steps throughout the day.
Okay?
That the laws that are lived and not simply abstracted or given. They
Right.
are absorbed in daily routine.
Right.
It is written in the present. I wouldn't know that, except in, and whereas the others speak of the future generations and remembering.
Okay.
In 10 through
15, whatever. Sure, I stopped
Right.
arbitrarily.
Yes, so there's a tense there, which I think changes the intensity of the command.
So, let me give fancy language to what you said.
Okay.
This is a call to the eternal present.
Oh, nice.
That every moment down through the ages, we are called now. We're not remembering what our ancestors did. We're not saying we'll do it. It's today.
Right.
And therefore, there's an intensification here. What's the motivation in this passage for doing what Vivian and Malcolm have pointed to? What's the motivation, Jackie?
Well, if you take to heart that you have to, I don't know how I can say this, but the teaching that you have, the feeling of the love of God is being passed on to the children, and every day remembering that through the mezuzah on the door, it has the scroll on it, to the, what are the things called on your head?
Just fill in, yeah.
Fill in. And constantly redoing it, you are passing on culture, the heritage, the religion to carry on.
Yes. Good. I like that. So, my mother says to me, put the tefillin on and so on and so on. What's my motivation? Why should I do it? Verses 1 through 3, so that good stuff will come to you. You'll get some good stuff. What's the motivation here? Intensity. But what's the one word that is the motivation? Candy?
Well, it's the power of positivity, and
Okay.
I think it's about love.
Okay.
And that's something that everybody has experienced.
You
and that
shall-
everybody wants in their life. It's part of peace, and it's part of tranquility.
Positive
And-
thinking.
Right.
Would you, and you also mentioned the word love. Isn't love the primary motivation here? It leads to positive things. You shall love the Lord your God. Don't you think this is juxtaposed to do it so that things will go well for you? Do it so the Lord doesn't break out in anger against you. The motivation here is not so that I'll get something, but I'm doing it out of love. Let me suggest to you an equivalent way of saying it, do it out of love. Do it for its own sake.
It's unconditional.
I'm sorry?
It's unconditional.
It's unconditional, and we do it out of love. Why do I love my friend? I know why. So that my friend will love me. So that maybe my friend, if I ask my friend out to lunch, my friend will ask me out to lunch. That's all consequence thinking. What's the highest motivation for inviting my friend to lunch? Because I love my friend. What am I getting out of it? Nothing extraneous to the relationship. So that one of the things that happens here is, let's call it what do I want to say here? Unpacking what loving God is as a motivation. Let's unpack it a little bit. Verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Would you accept the following translation of this? Make it your ultimate concern. With all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. With the deepest intensity. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. That's Jackie and Malcolm's point here. Impress them upon your children. The Hebrew is vishinantam, which comes from the word to teach in an intensive form. If you have the Hebrew, you can see there's a double nun there. The root of to teach is shin nun he, shana. But if you double the nun, you've intensified it. And the translation gets to the intensification. Don't just teach it, impress it. Find a way to make it become part of the emotional valence of this child's life. Impress them, teach intensively to your children. By the way, this is all what loving God means. Loving God is to live intensely with all of my faculties and to teach my children intensely. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away. What's an equivalent to that statement? When you stay at home and when you are away? Always. They came from far and near. That doesn't just mean they came from far and they came from there. It means they came from everywhere. He knows this subject from A to Z. That's just not A and Z, it's everything. When you stay at home and when you are away, let me ask you a question. What else is there in my life? Where else might I be other than at home or not at home? Nowhere. The colors represented in this room are gray and pink. That's not all colors. The colors in this room are gray and not gray. That's everything. So, it's another way of describing intensity. Recite them everywhere when you lie down and when you get up. What's an equivalent?
All the time.
Always. Every place, every time. Place and time. Yeah. I'm going to try to go for it, but I don't know if I can pull it off. Place and time is everything. I'm always in some place and some time. I don't know that everything is it, but every place. Look at the intensification here. Love with all your faculties, all the time, everywhere. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead, okay? So this can be understood in two ways. The Jewish tradition has defined them as tefillin, hand and foot. One of Rashi's grandsons, Rashi only had 4 daughters, and two of the 4 husbands, Rashi's sons-in-law, were great scholars themselves. Rabbeinu Tam and the Rashbam. The Rashbam, Rashi says they're the tefillin. The Rashbam, his son-in-law, I can imagine they're sitting around the table on a Tuesday afternoon. And Rashi says, you know what this verse means? It means tefillin. Get some straps and do that. And here's what the Rashbam says. No, I love you, but I think you're wrong here. They mean what you do with your hands, what you do with your head, thoughts and actions. It wasn't inevitable that this would mean tefillin. So in other words, it's not necessarily a move to ritual. It's also a move to all of me, my thoughts and my deeds. This is all loving God. In other words, if I asked you out of the blue, what do you imagine loving God means? Well, I love you. I mean, I got this pitter-patter and I feel strong. Well, you'll see Maimonides, if we get to Maimonides today, talks about this a little bit. No, love here is a way of behaving. My love leads to imperatives. That's the idea here about love. That love eventuates in action, but not any old action, but actions that cover all space, all time, all of me, head and hand, and inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Well, that does look like some literal inscription, and it could be a mezuzah. Now, it's harder to non-ritualize, inscribe them on the doorpost, than it is to non-ritualize hand and head. And so if I have to be doing a ritual for on the doorposts, then maybe I infer from that the author of this meant also ritualize the head and the hand. So one could see how they might have evolved an understanding about ritual. Okay? This has nothing to do with reward and punishment. It's doing it out of love, and it's not limited to land. Section 1 and Section 3 are about the land of Israel. And I might infer from section 1 and section 3 that all this stuff that Jackie and Malcolm have pointed to is for life in the land. What about life off the land? What about the diaspora? Oh, we could say, couldn't we, that we're supposed to do it there too. But sections 1 and sections 3 seem to limit the application of all of this to the land. Verses 4 through 9 universalize all of this. This is for everywhere. In other words, we, the rabbis sitting around the table and asking why did we pick this passage, we came up with a good passage, didn't we? This is the pure expression of why it is we should be doing all of this stuff. Do it out of love. Can I get you another cup of coffee? Yes, but could you possibly get me another bagel? I'll do it if you... Yes, honey, I will. That's love. And by the way, it's hard to think that way, isn't it? I'll talk about myself. If I do things for Jackie over and over again, don't tell her I said this. She might be watching, actually. I'm thinking at some point, well, when is it my turn? When's she going to do stuff for me? That's not love. That's sections 1 and 3. Here's the thing we could say about what I just said. Do I beat myself up for wanting my turn? Yes and no. No, I don't beat myself up. Why? I'm human. I have my own needs. It's not possible for me to keep doing for others over and over again and never have any reciprocity. Am I totally proud of this? No. But I forgive myself because I'm human. I'm doing it only out of love. I'm giving, and I'm never thinking about what I'm getting back. I want you to raise your hands to the following question. Let me rephrase it. Namely all of us now, we're going to ask ourselves about our motivation. And our motivation for doing things for others has nothing to do with getting things back. I'm never thinking again about when is it my turn? How come I'm always doing for you? How many could think this way for an entire lifetime? I'm going to be part of the vote here. How many could think this way? How many would have trouble thinking this way? Verses 4 through 9 ask too much. It's an ideal that I should be doing what I'm doing with intensification every place, every time, with all of me, and doing this for my children all the time. Nobody would deny that that would be a good way to live. But don't you think we would have trouble living this way? It is a kind of ideal, but it seems too much. In other words, we could ask about a religion that we could ask, who's it for? And there are at least two answers to this. Maybe this does cover the universe of discourse. It's for saints.
For what?
Saints. Or it's for the rest of us. What is verses 4 through 9? Who's it for? Saints. All the time? When I'm playing tennis, I got to be thinking about the love of God? I'm never interested in anything for me, reward and punishment. It's only love, and it's in most intense, comprehensive form. So we're stuck here with a dilemma if what I'm saying is plausible. The V'ahavta is both gorgeous and problematic. So here's what I want to do. We're gonna. The Shema takes a different form in the traditional prayer book than it does in the Reformed prayer book. In the traditional prayer book, the Shema consists of 3 biblical passages. In the Reformed prayer book, passages 2 and 3 are eliminated. In other words, what the Reformed prayer book cast its lot with was utopia. The traditional prayer book, here's what I want to suggest. The traditional prayer book is much more, without giving up utopia, is much more realistic about human motivation and how it is we might climb the utopian ladder. This doesn't help us to climb the ladder toward this vision. It just gives us the vision. And I'm not doing it. I can't do it. It's too much, too intense. All the time, every place, all of me. There's a famous midrash about Rabbi Kiva, who is being martyred by the Romans. And he says at that moment, he's praying. Actually, he's saying the Shema while they're burning his flesh. And his disciples are aghast. How can you say the Shema when the Romans those pagans are having a victory over your God by slaying one of God's great lovers? And Rabbi Kiva says the following: I've always said you shall love the Lord your God with all your soul and with all your might. I never knew what with all your soul meant until this moment. Even if I should have to give up my life. That's the extent to which the love of God with all your soul means. So Rabbi Kiva is thinking of this in utopian terms. It still applies even in the most extreme circumstances. Let's have a private vote here. That private in the sense that you'll have your answer, but we're not going to raise our hands.
Rabbi.
How many could be like Rabbi Kiva? I finally realized I've never been able to follow with all your soul. Thank God I have that opportunity now. Because the love of God asks for the most extreme self-sacrificial action. I don't know that I could do it. Charlotte? I'm sorry?
I have an Orthodox friend who just finished saying 11 months of Kaddish for both of her parents who died within 2 weeks of each other. And one of the things she told me was there were a couple of days when she didn't get to do Shachri, and it bothers her, but she figures that all told, she did manage to do all the things required of her for the 11 months. And it gave her a kind of well-being and strength that none of us have ever had. But there is something about laying tefillin that you don't do anything else, and you don't.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
Yes.
And it's really important. I'm partly envious of people who can do that. It's amazing.
So Charlotte, I love what you've said, because I want to focus on 2 things that you said. One is the intensification of that effort. She wanted to do this every single day. Even though she wasn't able to pull it off every single day, she wanted to. she was utopian in her expectation. Just in this language, I'm not pinning this on her, this is an expression of her love of God. Certainly a love of parent, but a love of God. Okay? But the second thing you've said is she did it through a ritual. This passage does not focus on ritual. I'm not saying it doesn't have anything to do with ritual, because it might be tefillin. But it's basically about a generalized view of how do I do this? And the simple answer is with intensification, with intensity, all the time, every place. So what I want to do is I want to move to the second paragraph of the Shema as the tradition understands it. So now we're going to explore traditional Judaism's view of the Shema and ask ourselves, who's right? Are they right to include the second paragraph, or are we right for eliminating it? What's the logic and the value of having paragraph 2 and paragraph 3? And what's the logic of not having it? So now we're in the process of how is it that we begin to do, this dovetails back to ethics, what we're supposed to do, the instruction, the rules, the laws. Jim?
In the bigger picture, what we're looking at, is this Moses telling everybody?
Yes.
It's the end of his life.
Yes.
And so I think the subtlety
Yes.
in that paragraph
Yes.
is something that's right in front of you, but you don't see.
Yes.
You ask for like the quid pro quo of
Yes.
the whole thing.
Yes.
Well, the fact is, Moses and all the people he's talking to woke up that morning. So the fact that they're living ought to be enough of a reciprocity for doing the right thing.
Okay.
And now these people he's talking to are going into a foreign land.
Yes.
And they're going to be tempted with all kinds of different things. So I think it's his last-ditch effort to stick to the program.
Oh gosh, you're so right. But what is the program? Is the program, in my terms, utopia?
No, it's an attempt to get there. It's the same with the 613 mitzvahs. It's commonly thought nobody can do it, but you got to try.
Okay, so what Jim is saying is, even though it may seem impossible to do, verses 4 through 9, it's a goal. And the question is, what are the vehicles that might get us closer to the goal? This does not deal with vehicles. It deals with the acme of it. What are the vehicles? And one answer is the 613 commandments. The commandments are for doing, but they're also for climbing the ladder. This is the top of the ladder. So that's a very good answer. Now, if I want to situate Jim's answer into the prayer book, now we're getting to a very, very long service. Okay, 613 divided by 3 per hour. Let's say 60 per hour. Let's say 100 per hour. Let's say 300. I can enact 300 commandments an hour. That's still a 2-hour service. So is there a shortcut? Is there a way of putting into a reasonable amount of time the issue of vehicle, of means? Okay, so that's the challenge here. But there were several hands here, so let's pause for a minute. But let's hold on to that, because that's where we're going next.
Vehicle. 7, impress them upon your children. I think that's the whole key, because without impressing them upon your children, where would our religion be? Where would it go? That's how it goes from generation to generation, And everything that's in here, that's the key to the whole thing. And if one child breaks it down, then that little, the puzzle, piece of the puzzle stops.
Yes. No, I think that's great. That's part of the genius of any tradition, teaching them to the next generation. What do I teach them according to this passage?
You're teaching them God is one.
Okay?
To love the God as yourself.
Yes?
Basically, do unto others as you would have done to you.
Doesn't say that here.
It does. It implies it.
Does it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think it all, in this one paragraph, it is everything. You are to always think about God and not, look, I don't think about God continuously.
Yes.
But I could be driving and I'm looking at the sky and the sun and I'm looking at nature, and who's making that? It's coming from somewhere. The energy force, is that God?
All the time that you're driving, that's what you're thinking about?
All the time? No.
How about when you're walking to your car? Or from your
Depends
car?
where I am. If I'm at the temple, I'm thinking about God.
Okay, very good. And let's see, there are in the week 24 times 7 hours.
Yes.
How many of them are you coming to temple?
Not coming to temple, but I must tell you, I occasionally pull up the Torah on my iPad and read it.
Are you looking for extra credit?
No.
You're getting it.
I'm
You're
just making
getting
a
it.
statement. I'm just making a statement.
I think that's great. Very good, very good, very good. Yeah, I think what Jackie is saying here is, if one thinks of a continuum, let's say from 0 to infinity, and this is asking for infinity all the time and all of that, none of us, just by virtue of being here, for example, is at 0. We're all doing some things. We're all on the path. So I think you're right. There's a lot here that's implied. I think it's abstract in here. We need to put some meat on those bones. These are the bones, so to speak. We need to begin the operation. How do we operationalize the climb from 0 to infinity? Jim suggests the mitzvot. You suggest loving your neighbor as yourself, as an example. But that's not in here. You might say it's implicit, as you might say everything is implicit, because this is asking for everything. But practical people that we are, it's not enough to say, look, it's implicit there, and start climbing. No, I need the manual. Yeah. You know, my father loved the manual. When he got something new, he would sit down at night and read a 300-page manual. By the way, when I was teaching at the College of Jewish Studies and we were given computers, and I said to the president, a close friend of mine, David Ariel of blessed memory, I said to him, David, where's the manual? And you know what he said to me? Real men don't need manuals. And there's something to that. I mean, if we feel some self-confidence, we'll figure it out. A circuitous path, but we'll figure it out. But in this regard, we sort of need the manual. 613 commandments of the manual. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are part of the manual for how to get here. Okay? Malcolm?
This love is reciprocal. That is, the covenant between me and God, or us and God, is reflexive, and God loves me
Yes.
all the time.
Yes. I'll go for it. Yes. What about, see, the V'ahavta says you shall love the Lord your God, but as I pointed out, the two prayers before that tell us what God has done for us. God has made a world that is law-like. In other words, when spring comes, God willing, I know what's coming next, summer. If I didn't know, and all of a sudden, in the middle of June, it started snowing, and it was snowing for days like it did 2 weeks ago. Or when I get up in the morning and put my feet on the ground, it caves in. That wood doesn't hold me. Or that I brush my teeth at whatever time I get up, and I look out the window, and it's midnight again. That's not the world God created. God created a world where we can count on regularity. In other words, we can go about our business by and large, knowing that we can plan our day, and by and large, we're going to be able to pull it off because of the law-likeness of the world. That's a gift. The other gift God gave us was Torah.
So where I was going, Roger,
Yes?
is you were troubled or expressed some concern that this perfection was unattainable, but that's not the expectation of obtaining it. It's pursuing it.
Do you think so? That sounds pretty modern to me.
We're not God.
I'm a baseball player, and I want to get to the major leagues. And so I'm playing sandlot ball, and then somebody says to me, maybe you should join the minor leagues. So I try out for the Fargo Eskimos, and they hire me. Now I'm playing Class D baseball, and I'm on a bus every other day, driving 4 hours and eating at McDonald's, because I'm not paid very much, and for another game. And next year I'm in Class C, and the year after I'm in Class B. And somebody says to me, why are you doing this? And I say, I have a friend whose name is Malcolm, and he tells me why I'm doing it. For the experience of doing it. No. I want to get to the meet. I want the goal. I want the goal.
That's not what I said.
Yes?
I'm
Okay.
saying you can't beat God at baseball.
Okay, all right. Oh, so God represents perfection.
That's what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying. And I can't get to perfection, but what I can do is I can strive for it.
And you should.
And I should.
That's what the instruction is.
Right. But how far do I think I can go until I really start going and recognize I could go further, I can do more?
Go for it.
Isn't a goal a magnet drawing us to do more and more? Definitely. So in a certain way, utopia has a role, even though I can't get there. And if I lower my sights, what's my goal? The only thing I want to do is I want to play for the Fargo Eskimos. Okay. Somebody once told me, yeah. One story I tell about myself, I played some baseball in college, and the story I say is that a scout was looking at me, and when I came off the field, the scout said to me, "Did you ever think of becoming a rabbi?" So that was the end of the line. Yeah, but I wanted to be, One time somebody said to David Ariel again, "Did Rabbi Klein, was he next in line to play center field for the Yankees?" That's what I heard that person said. And David told me this. I said, no way. He said, "What's the harm in saying yes?"
So can we use a different metaphor than this ladder to the perfection? I mean, we are finite, and we have probably one or two rungs there to deal with.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us but the human impulses that we have for striving?
Yeah.
Other-
This phrase, "may your reach exceed your grasp." always wanting more than we can reach at the moment now. And, you know, we could say there's a limit to that, because it's true there's a limit. But should I live my life in the presence of that limit? Or should I think of myself as limitless, knowing that I can't get to limitless, but the more I aspire to, the higher I'm going to go? And why not aspire to perfection? And try for it. And I'll probably get further than if I started with my limitations. Although I'm limited.
But not everyone's like that. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody strives for the top. Not everyone strives for perfection.
Yeah.
There are some people who are very happy. Well, maybe I'm wrong. What I consider mediocre, somebody else might consider perfect.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's all subjective.
Right. I think that Judaism is a religion of perfection. I think when you have God in your system, this is how I put it, you've introduced infinity into your system. I mean, it says, Leviticus 19, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. What is that telling us? God is at the top. We're not getting there, but that's our goal, to emulate God. That's our goal. And to the degree that we take it seriously, we'll probably get further along on that path than if we said, I think we all agree with this, but I think I think the tension here in our conversation is that we recognize two things. That utopia, perfection, is on the agenda. Verses 4 through 9 put it on the agenda. But let's be realistic, folks. It's subjective, or the process. And I'm not denigrating any of that. But it's in tension with the utopian impulse, which I want to say, I could be wrong, that's Judaism. Perfection. And let's test ourselves against it, also giving ourselves a break. But 613 commandments. You know, if I were doing that, and I thought to myself, now how many commandments is it reasonable to ask people to do? I would go for 40. 613? Seriously? A lot of them were in abeyance during the time of the diaspora. You couldn't observe the Shemitah, letting the land lie fallow, because that's the land of Israel. But now that we're back, 613 again. We just know we can't do them all. I can do maybe 2 a day. It's not the next 2 every day. Sometimes I'm repeating them. In 50 days, I haven't done 100. I've probably done 6. Okay, so Candy.
I'm not sure how this fits in, and so I hope that you can comment on how the whole idea of this intensification toward utopian perfection.
Yes.
I think that it builds character, and I think that character is important in people.
I love that.
And I'm not sure how it fits into what we're talking about.
I think you're providing yet another value of perfectionism. If you have utopia in your system, I think this is your point, it helps to create character, because I'm always striving to better myself. If my scale is 1 to 50, not 1 to utopia, once I get to 41, I'm going to say, gosh, I'm such a great person. 43. Oh, now I can just play ball forever, because I have really... But if it's 1 to infinity, I'm continuing to build myself if I take that seriously. And questioning, testing myself, and finding ways to refine my character. Yeah, I think you've made a good point.
But is that to say that people who don't believe in God lack character?
That does not follow, of course, no. Although I would say, maybe this is elitist of me, that whatever system you have, I mean, you can be a Marxist and believe in the value of work and the worker, and that we ought to equalize pay in some way or another. Hey, Carl, why do you believe that? Because I believe in the dignity of all people. Isn't there God behind it? Not at all. I don't need God. And I don't think he does. I mean, it's possible to have high, unreachable goals, an egalitarian society where each person is paid according to his or her worth. And what is everybody worth? Infinity. We're all made in the image of God. Marx has a kind of, I'm not saying I understand Marx, but this is my sense, has a secular version of that human beings are valuable, and therefore nobody should be living in poverty. Everybody should have an opportunity. Doesn't mean that everybody gets paid the same, but everybody ought to have the opportunity to be paid the same. And if you were born in poverty or one thing or another, then there ought to be compensatory action by a benign government. So I don't think you need to believe in God, but I think you need to believe in utopia, in a sense, that we're on a path. Not that everybody believes that, or it's necessary to live a good life. So I don't want to be elitist about it, but I love the idea of may your reach exceed your grasp forever. And the Via Hafta does that, stamps it on our imagination. Let's look quickly, because we're running out of time here, but our discussion has been great today. Deuteronomy 11, verse 13. Deuteronomy, page 400. 292. This is, in traditional prayer books, the second paragraph of the Shema. This passage exists in all traditional prayer books, okay? And once again, it was a matter of choice by the rabbis. You know, here's my sense of what they were thinking about. Now we've got utopia, paragraph 1. Utopia is a good thing to have, but it's hard for people to live that way. What can we do to help them? Deuteronomy 11, verse 13 to 21. This is the next thing we need to put in there. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Lord your God and serving him with all your heart and soul, you see an echo from the first paragraph, I will grant the rain for your land in season. That's the whole thing right here. Reward and punishment on the land. The early rain, the latter rain. You shall gather in your new grain, wine, and oil. I'll provide grass in the fields, and thus you will eat your fill. Take care not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them, for the Lord's anger will flare up against you. This is what Bennett missed in the first paragraph, the punishment part. Now they're filling it in. For the Lord's anger, verse 17, will flare up against you, and he will shut up the skies, so there'll be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce. And you will soon perish from the good land that the Lord assigned to you. Yow. Therefore impress these words upon your heart. Bind them for a sign on your hand. You see, I mean, in this sense, this paragraph shouted out to the rabbis, because it echoes the first paragraph, carries forward some of those ideas, while adding what that paragraph didn't include. It's really pulling section 1 and section 3 back in the picture. And teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home, when you're scribing them to the end that you and your children may endure in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign to them, as long as there is a heaven over the earth. Bennett?
I find that as a very dangerous paragraph, because this is addressed at a community, and we're in the middle of a drought. I've been practicing all of these things. Somebody in this community isn't, and I'm gonna find them and punish them, because we need this water.
Yeah.
And it leads to that kind of
I think that's a powerful point, actually. This is not addressed to the individual per se, but to the community. So if the community is suffering, somebody has been doing it wrong.
right, and we're gonna find that person.
We've got to find that person because we don't want the drought to continue. Yeah, so
It's like who we're gonna throw out of the boat in.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, gosh. I mean, I have a response, but it's weak. I mean, my response is, that's a misuse of this paragraph. The problem is,
I agree it's a misuse, but that's what it's.
yeah, but this isn't, where do we find this passage? Let's be modern day about it. Let's go down to Loganberry books, and search for a nice modern novel, light reading. I don't want to do anything heavy tonight, so I go down and I get a light novel. I'm reading it, and I find this paragraph there. Oh, come on. Who is the author to say this? What's the imperative force? What's the danger? Zero. Nobody else is reading it, and there's people who read it aren't taking it seriously, or to put it differently, they're not taking it as the gospel. This is the gospel. It's in the book. And the book we've been taking seriously for millennia. So what's in here has consequences, and it's certainly been used this way. So I think you're right to point it out. Maybe it's implicit in the whole reward and punishment thing, because not everybody is going to be able to do what the good book says to do, and therefore the community is imperiled by them. That's a good point. So let me ask this question. We're sitting around this table again as the rabbis, and we recognize utopia of paragraph. So we're searching for something else to add. And we decide to put in the prayer book paragraph, this paragraph, Deuteronomy 11:13 through 21. And we're now going around the table and we're asking ourselves, should we put it in? What is your answer to that question? Who's right? The reform movement that took it out, or the tradition that still insists on having it in? Who's right, do you think?
You're asking a prejudiced group.
We could easily put our prejudice aside, because this is really a conceptual issue. I assume that if we say, let's suppose we all arrived at a consensus without any qualifications, that this paragraph belongs in the prayer book. How many of us are now going to go down to synagogue from now on Taylor Road?
What?
How many of us are now going to be persuaded that we ought to really be going to an Orthodox shul? I take it none of us are going to do that. And therefore, this is not, what we're going to favor from now on, but what's the right answer here? What's the rationale? Two great groups, traditional Judaism and Reform Judaism. I mean, let's not diminish the power of Reform Judaism. Without Reform Judaism, the Jewish community would be deeply imperiled. And so we have to take seriously what the Reform movement did. And what they did here was they took it out. Malcolm?
It seems to me it makes the foregoing, it adds a transactional or conditional element, which I think then takes away the infinite, it takes away from the.
When you say takes away,
Perfect.
and what do you mean takes away?
Oh. So if I don't do these and rains come, then what? If I do these and rain, and all of us do these, but rains don't come,
Yes.
it just makes it more, concrete, and then it creates expectation.
It's what I can do. I can try to follow the commandments. Why should I? Here are two answers. Because I love God.
What?
I love God.
Oh.
Or
I want something in return.
I want something in return. This is what I can do. Reward in thinking. I am not the kind of person who can do and do and do and do for others and not get something back. I want a reward for what I'm doing. I want to feel that I've gotten to. I don't know about you. I'm human. And that's what I need as a motivation. This deals with the question, how am I going to live with utopia only in my head? I got to bring it down a little bit. I've got to acknowledge human nature. And we human beings need reward and punishment thinking. I'm going to read to you what Maimonides says about this. This is from Isidore Tursky's compilation of Maimonidean stuff. This is in the first book of the Mishnah Torah, his great compilation of Jewish law. And it's at the end of the first section of the first book, the Book of Knowledge. And the title of this section happens to be Teshuvah, repentance. Whoever engages in the study of Torah in order that he may receive a reward and avoid the calamities is not studying Torah for its own sake. The image here is utopia. And the only right way of doing it is to do it for its own sake. And if you do it to get a reward or to avoid calamities, I'm going to put it in our language, not his, you're not paying attention to paragraph 1 of the Shema. Whoever occupies himself with Torah, neither out of fear nor for the sake of recompense, but solely out of love for the Lord of the whole earth who enjoined us to do so, is occupied with Torah for its own sake. Paragraph 1. The sages, here's the crucial word, right here, after the two words, the sages. The sages, however, said, one should always engage in the study of Torah, even if not for its own sake. For he who begins thus will end by studying it for its own sake. Hence, when instructing certain people, we teach them to serve God out of fear or for the sake of reward, till their knowledge increases and they've attained a large measure of wisdom. Then we reveal to them this secret truth little by little and train them by easy stages till they have grasped and comprehended it and serve God out of love. So, all of a sudden, the Shema becomes a process. The first thing stated is the goal. The second paragraph gives us the means. So, in reading the Shema, we're going this way. Paragraph 1, then paragraph 2, then paragraph 3. But the logic is paragraph 3 leads to paragraph 2, leads to paragraph 1. The rabbis are at the same time idealistic and realistic. They didn't say to us, the goal is the only thing, because we're human. They also said, and we know you're human, And therefore, we're going to give you a vehicle. We're going to give you a ladder. And start climbing it. Fast on Yom Kippur. I don't want to. I don't get the point. The point is not the point, but getting on the path. Do it, and you'll come to see the value of doing it. It's Aristotle's notion that if you want your kids to be able to express appreciation for what somebody does for you, don't say to them, you've got to express appreciation. Don't you feel appreciation? I want you to appreciate that. Why? Are you adult? Just get them to start saying please and thank you. Why should I? Just do it. I'll give you candy if you do it. In another passage, that's what Maimonides says. Give them candy. And then he says, by the way, that's deplorable. But do it anyway, because that will get them on the path. And it's true, isn't it? If I get into the habit of saying please and thank you, it's possible that I'm going to come to see the point of it and do it out of love, which means doing it for its own sake. I once said to my kids, when they're real little, one of my kids didn't want to do something at the Shabbat table. So I said to her in the presence of my older child, I'll give you candy. And my older child, after lunch, she came up to me, she said, Dad, that was deplorable. And I said to her, one day you'll get the idea. And there is something to that, isn't there? We need paragraph 2 in order to be able to do paragraph 1. So why did we take it out of the prayer book? Stuart, you've had your hand up for a while.
I think that the idea of doing something because it's better to do it
Yes.
is anti-altruism.
Okay, oh, very good. Oh, tell me.
Because,
Sees me do that.
Thank you.
because we think of ourselves as better because we did it. And that is anti-altruism.
It's too focused on me.
Correct.
How good am I a great person? I did that. I gave tzedakah. How much did you give? I gave X. You're a good person. I gave double X. You're a better person. I gave 10 times X. What a great person you are. It's all about me. Whereas you're saying there ought to be the impulse to help somebody else.
And that in itself is against altruism.
Is it?
I think so.
I'm doing it for you? I'm thinking about you.
No, I think, yes.
That is altruism.
No, that's anti-altruism.
Is it? Is it? Why? I'm thinking about you. I'm giving something to you. Why is that anti?
Because I feel better.
Who's you? The guy who's getting it?
No, the guy who's doing
I
it.
feel better.
I feel better knowing that I've given you this gift.
Look, but
or donated to charity.
But does a motivation need to be praiseworthy? Is a motive praiseworthy only if it's unmixed with other motivations? Can't I be altruistic and egoistic at the same time? You remember the laws of charity that we're supposed to give 10%. And if you really want to go to extreme, do 20%. But you're forbidden to do more than 20% because you also have to think about yourself. In other words, if I unpack my motivation for helping you, I would come to at least 2 things. I'm trying to help you, and I want to feel that I did the right thing. I want to feel something about myself. Does the second part of that compromise the first part, or can I only be altruistic if I don't think about me at all? I'm allowed to be human here, aren't I? And I feel good about that. But I also am motivated to help you. You know what, Stuart? I'm going to help you if you promise to help me back. That's not altruism.
Right.
I'm doing this because I care about you. Even if it's a little self-sacrificial, I'm doing more than I really can afford because I know that you need it more than I do.
Isn't Maimonides,
Steps of the ladder.
yes, where it's a higher level where the giver and the recipient, don't know.
Right, right.
I'm giving money to a charity, and that is giving you the money.
Well, okay, that raises a different question. What's the best way of doing it?
Yeah.
If I give it to you directly, then you're beholden to me, and that's not good. I've got to do it anonymously, and you can't know and I can't know ideally. But, by the way, all those steps are acts of charity. They're acts of, they're tzedakah. Even giving grudgingly is tzedakah. It's a good thing. Why can't I feel a little good about myself for doing that? I suppose we could argue that right, as I climb the ladder of charity, I think less and less about myself. Until finally at the end, I'm only giving and I'm not getting anything back. That's paragraph 1 of the Shema. Maybe that's paragraph 1. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Only the purest. I don't know. It's an interesting point. I mean, I think our motivations are always mixed and can be, while still doing good things. And you raise the question of, if I'm doing something for somebody else, isn't that a kind of consequentialist behavior?
If you're doing good things because you want the rain to fall, and that is what God is saying in Deuteronomy.
Right. Well, first of all, I am doing good things. And I'm just wondering, what's the event? The event is itself complicated. The event is that I've done something.
Yeah.
Plus, there are consequences. I might have done, the fact that there are consequences, let's suppose I take somebody out to lunch. Why am I doing it? Because I love that person. Why else? No, there's no other reason. I'm doing it out of love. And that night, that person calls me and says, thank you for taking me out to lunch. I'm taking you out to lunch tomorrow. So now I've gotten a consequence from it. But that's not why I did it.
Yeah.
So the complexity of an event may not compromise the motivation, something like that. Jackie?
Wouldn't the consequence be, if you took someone out to lunch, you want to be with that person, you want to have a discussion, but it also, you're getting a reward. It makes you feel good when you know the person is enjoying the company as well.
Right.
So you're still getting a reward. If I do something for somebody, to help somebody, I see someone fall, I go over there, I help them, whatever I do to help them, I get a reward. It makes me feel good. So there is a reward and an internal reward. It doesn't mean it has to be, they don't even have to say thank you.
If you're right about what you're saying, in a way it blows this distinction out of the water. because feeling good about doing something does follow doing something good. I feel good about it. And does that mean there's no altruism, there's no doing it for its own sake? I would say any response that eliminates that possibility is itself problematic. And here's why. I think the question is not what follows from an event, but why I did it in the first place. And if I did it to feel good, I'm going to go help that person because I want to feel good. That's not for its own sake. But as a, let's call it an epiphenomenon, something that attaches itself to the phenomenon itself, I did it to help that person. And I feel good about it. But that's not why I did it. Doesn't that save it? I think it needs to be saved, because what kind of a system is it where you can't make a distinction between doing something for its own sake and doing something for the sake of reward? If that distinction falls apart, something is lost. Something powerful is lost. So I think it behooves us to save it, but only if we can convince ourselves that it's not just to save it, but because it's cogent. And I think it is cogent to say, we do something for somebody, and something else comes from it.